There are millions of podcasts being done all over the world that take on the personalities of their creator. Some bring in thousands of listeners each week. Some bring in large amounts of revenue, while others entertain millions and help sell products. If you're like many podcasters, you want to reach your maximum potential. But how? How do you make your podcast stand out from all the rest? Join Dr. Barrett Matthews as he talks to experts who are doing it on The Productive Podcaster. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of The Productive Podcaster. I am Dr. Barrett Matthews, and I want to welcome you all to the show. Now, here's the thing. What is The Productive Podcaster for? Especially for those of you, if it's your first time listening to us, I want to let you know what we are as a podcast to help podcasters. What I want to do is make sure that you understand that there is no cookie cutter way to do a podcast. Everybody wonders, well, am I doing it the right way? Should I do it this way because I saw someone else do it? Should I do it that way because I saw someone else do it? Should I even get started because I'm afraid of this? Let me tell you, you don't have to be right. You just have to get started. That's the way to be productive, and we want you to be a productive podcaster. So what I do is I bring on so many different people from different walks of life who do different types of podcasts to help you be a productive podcaster. So I want to make sure you guys do that. But before we get started, I want to make sure that you subscribe and you share our podcast with everyone you know. Let them know the Productive Podcaster is seen on YouTube and can be heard on all of the podcast platforms, your Apple, your Google, your TuneIn, all of them, Stitcher, Spotify. You can listen to the Productive Podcaster, subscribe, and let us know. Join our Facebook group, The Productive Podcaster. Now, I'm going to start out today's episode with a segment that I love, and it's called Pros and Cons.
Pros and Cons.
Now, you're wondering, what is Pros and Cons? Pros and Cons is a segment I do where I give you guys a professional tip to help you become a pro in the podcasting industry. And today's pros and cons is very, very simple, very cerebral, if I may say so. It's a cerebral tip. And that is, get your head right before you start your podcast. Make sure your mind is clear before you're doing your podcast. You don't want to do your podcast when your head's all over the place. You don't want to do your podcast when you got stuff on your mind, stressing you out or worrying about different things. You want to be clear. You want to be focused. You want to be in that moment when you're doing your podcast, because guess what? If you don't, the audience will know it, they will feel it, they will hear it, and they will tune out. So you want to keep them tuning in. So make sure you are focused on your podcast. That is today's pros and cons. I want to tell you, we got a fantastic guest coming up for you in a couple minutes, but what I want you to do is hang tight. We're going to be right back after this message with a very, very special guest.
You've heard the rumblings. You even thought about starting your own. But how? Everybody knows podcasting is the fastest and best way to get your message out and grow your business all at once. Although everybody knows this, nobody showed you what to do. Well, Podcast Nation is ready to do all the heavy lifting for you while you just deliver your message and grow. Join the nation and start your podcast today. Text podcast to 929-244-4323 and make them hear your voice.
Do you hear what I hear? That's the sound of your tribe, your audience, your people. That's the sound of your nation. The people who love to hear the sound of your voice as you bring your special message to them in your very own podcast. How do you get it to them? Let us handle that. We're Podcast Nation, and we make sure they hear your voice. Podcast Nation is a full-service podcasting firm that does all of the hard work for you so that you can be the talent and get your message to your people. Just text podcast to 929-244-4323 and talk to one of our staff on how you can get started with your very own done-for-you podcast. Or go to podcastnation.com and get started today. That's PODCAST nation.com. Your people are waiting on you. Make them hear your voice. Podcast Nation.
welcome back to the Productive Podcaster. I am Dr. Barrett Matthews, and I told you before we went to break that I have a very special guest for you today on the Productive Podcaster. Her podcast, oh my God, Moving to Oneness, is a fantastic. I listened to a couple episodes today already, and I'm just happy to have Miss Meilin Ehlke on the show today. She is a fantastic person who focuses on oneness, and she is about you getting clear. You heard me talk about making sure your mind is clear before you do a podcast. Well, she can help you do that with her podcast. So I want you to make sure that you subscribe to her podcast as well. But I'm so excited to have her on the show. And here's the thing, for those of you who are scared to get a podcast started, or you're thinking, well, I don't have the experience, her podcast is relatively new, but it's doing great. So why don't you get started? Stop making people wait and listen to Meilin as she comes on the Productive Podcaster. Meilin Ehlke, welcome to the Productive Podcaster.
Woohoo! Thank you, Barrett. I looked at some of your podcasts too, and you know what, the part I loved, you told people to have fun. And that is it, because if it's not fun, why even start doing it?
Ooh, amen.
Yeah. This is, I think, the most important. It has to move you to do it. It has to draw you. If I look at my life at the moment, the most fun is editing I do all of it myself. You know, I do the pictures, I have conversations with people that I think I would like to have one day on, or maybe I have them and say, let's speak right now and do it. So
yeah,
it has to be coming out of the moment.
I love it. I love it. And see, that I agree with you 100%, because I tell people all the time, if your podcast becomes a job, then you shouldn't be doing it.
No.
Because it should not be that way. You should be talking about something you enjoy talking about.
Yes.
It shouldn't be a chore.
And it has to invigorate yourself, right? It has to stimulate you. It has to be something, I believe, that you're really interested.
Yeah.
Or what it cannot not share.
Right. Now let me ask you something. When you talk about your podcast, Moving to Oneness, how do you describe oneness?
For me, oneness is, I believe we're part of all. You know, every human being, we're particles that came together. But our whole cosmos, our Earth, is also made out of those particles. And I have nature, I have people, we have animals, we have stones, we sky. It is all comes together to play like in a theater. We cannot separate each other, because whatever happens somewhere else influences me. Whatever action I do influences others.
I love that. I love that. Now, a few years ago, I got a chance to meet an Indian Sikh. His name is Ratanjit Sunday, and he lives in Cleveland, Ohio. But he's a very deep person, and he has a whole system, a whole thing around oneness. And that's when I was really first exposed to the concept of oneness with him a few years ago. And then so I heard the name of your podcast. I'm like, oh, this is intriguing. So I like this, because I was really exposed to it a few years ago. So what made you want to do a podcast on this subject?
It's really interesting. It's a long story. And I hope, I can shortcut it. It's a few years. But I've went, when my son was born, I wanted to live my truth. I wanted to be the inspiration. I didn't want to tell him something and not live it. Right? So, and I don't know, then from that moment on, a lot of things shifted in my life. Cats moved me often to certain things. So I learned shamanism for animals.
Wow.
And how to communicate it. And what I noticed, what my uniqueness was, I was able to speak certain sounds or languages, and even animal languages. And then later, when we moved back to Germany from Atlanta, then I came in shamanism. I met channels and that physically embodied other channels and beings. And so I really, my own body became a home of many different energies that were not always mine. So it started with me, and one day, I started singing, and this driver of singing and noticing how people change and energy changes when I sing, I was very held back. I said, oh my God, Meilin, you cannot do that. You have no change. But then I noticed, no, it does change. Someone said something back to me, that what they experienced, I said, wow. And, so I tested. First, I would sing to the trees outside and let the wind carry it away. And then I thought, I would like to speak to friends. So I started sharing my wisdom and my songs with friends. At that time, it was still over telephone. Mm-hmm. Then I became courageous because, the first Facebook friends, because then I had also English speaking. I'm bilingual. And I lived so long in America. My whole awakening was in America. And and then I said, I would like to do a radio show. And suddenly someone appeared and gave me a radio show where I didn't have to censor myself or go into certain breaks and cuts. And I was allowed to use every word I wanted to. So I had a show for 6 years where I could invite people, I could speak, callers could come in or write in, and I could answer, and I could be very free. That was important for me. I don't like things that are planned. It has to come out of the moment. I don't even know what I speak until I open my mouth on the show, right?
Well,
it's important. Sometimes just start talking. We don't have to know it all.
That's true. And it's funny because I talked to a gentleman last week about starting a podcast, and he was afraid of kind of what you said. He said, I don't know, some of the things I say, I don't know if the FCC will come after me. I said, the FCC has nothing to do with this. I said, when you're doing your podcast, it's you. It's your freedom. You can talk about what you want to whenever you want to. It's your podcast. Those that don't want to listen don't have to listen. But it's basically, it's your show to do that. So and I'm glad you brought that up because it takes away the boundaries when you're doing a podcast. And I like that because a lot of people, and here's the thing, everyone is not for everybody. Every subject matter is not for everybody. Don't worry about the people that it's not for. Worry about the people that it's for. And the main person it needs to be for is you. So if you enjoy it.
I believe every single sentence we say and someone hears, it has impact. It is really important to believe in that. Every word that is spoken and that is spoken with love and with the intention to support, right? Like you, Barry, you're so genuine in bringing the message over in inspiring others to speak. And I too, I want to inspire with my stories others to try too, to not hold back. I have, I don't know how many thousand things happened in my life. I'm like, call myself a stand-up girl. And I just get up again, I fall. But nowadays I'm even happy when I fall and I'm really, really sad because I know it's releasing something or it's letting me become more aware of something else that I haven't seen before. And every moment is precious. Every relationship, I believe, is precious. So
it is. And Meilin, I want to bring up something that a lot of people have these preconceived notions about starting a podcast. And one thing I tell people all the time is that when you do a podcast, you're not just talking to your neighborhood. You're not just talking to your city. You're not just talking to your state. You're not just talking to your country. Meilin, tell everyone where you're on here from, where you are right now.
I'm sitting in Germany, Bavaria, southern Germany, right? And we're connecting.
Right.
Worldwide.
And her message, see, here's the thing, her podcast, I heard her podcast here. She heard my podcast there. What I'm telling you guys is that your podcast can reach the whole world. You are limiting your thinking. A lot of you out there, if you're thinking that it's only going to reach a small group of people, make sure your message can, and like she just mentioned a minute ago, when you say something out of your mouth, you don't know who it can touch because it's going to touch somebody. It could touch someone all the way in Australia. It could touch someone in Timbuktu. You don't know that. So, but you have to get it out there because if you feel that your message can help someone, don't make people wait for it. Get it out there. I love the fact that I'm talking to someone while she's in Germany. I love that. I think that's.
The funny thing is you're saying this. I have, on Facebook, I have connections around the world. But the interesting part, you can see where your podcast is being listened to.
Yeah.
So the third country after Germany and the US was South Korea. I said, oh my God, South Korea. It's the last country. You think maybe and it's none of my tribe. So someone found it. And I'm a big believer that when you are you, and I'm me, and we are we, the vibrations attract the people. So they will play around on the internet, and boom, they found you, or they find you. And trust that the right person will listen to your show.
Yeah, and that's the thing. The right people will listen to your show. And I always encourage people, don't rush it. Don't rush it, because it'll come. Because a lot of people start a podcast. Oh, I only had 3 people listen. Well, guess what? Those 3 people needed to hear it. Those 3 people needed to hear it.
This is how I started. I had a vision of having one 4 years ago. But I let time fly until the moment is right. I always say the body starts moving us suddenly. Mm-hmm. And then I had a conversation with a friend, but I had to meet her first a year before. Then I had to talk again, and I said, "Oh, let's make a Facebook group where we can hum maybe once a month together." And then we didn't see each other for 3 months. And I said, "Oh, I painted something. Take a look." And I showed it to her. And the painting I did of my logo gave us the title. So suddenly it was moving to oneness, because I had painted something. I'm a wisdom painter. And so we said, wow. And we looked if the domain was there. It was there. And I think that was so overwhelming. Yeah. That again, big for 2 months. She had to do things. I had to do things. Things got postponed, and it was all right. So the next time we came together, we wrote a few sentences that worked with moving to oneness, what we understood under it. And then I said, I looked for music, and I looked for music. That's another funny story. I think the second song I heard, I knew it was the song. But then I thought, okay, but my co-host, she needs to choose a few. Okay. And I spent a month looking for the right music, always knowing. I came always back to that one because I felt it the moment I heard it. Yeah, that it was the right one for me. And then at the end, I sent her 5, and the one she picked was mine, that I had loved so much.
Oh, that's
so you
cool.
Trust even there, everyone. If you feel and your heart it feels light and you feel excited and light, don't keep on going. You already have it. Sometimes we'll find things really quickly.
Now, how often do you do your podcast?
Yeah, so that was the music we found January, and I think February we did the first recording. Mm-hmm. And we do it a little different. Sometimes it's me, sometimes we're together, Denise and me, and then on other times we invite guests. And we said we wanted to be free. We don't want a very rigid. For example, now she's moving, helping her mother. So I keep going a little bit with the momentum. Yeah, we recorded slowly whenever we got the time or.
Okay, so you don't even have a regimented schedule.
No, I didn't. We didn't want that.
I love it. And see, I'm saying this I'm glad that you said that, because to the people that are listening or watching us, I want them to understand that there is no cookie, because you heard people come on the Productive Podcast and talk about you have to schedule this time out, you have to do this. That's the way they do it. But Meilin does it a different way, and she still has a productive podcast.
It would kill me. I don't function. I love to live my rhythm. And so Denise, it has to feel free and soft, as you said. Then otherwise I cannot be creative. And so then we recorded, I think, and we did a slow, I also had to learn. So luckily I come from a landscape architecture background, right? Really? Photoshop I knew how to use, I could do that. But I wanted to edit my own. So I had to learn about editing. I had to build up community of podcasters. I had to find it, or it had to come into my life. I give it time to come into my life. So suddenly I had here in Nuremberg software for free, super, because, those are some geeks that come together to do it. And I think this is important. I have felt a home, and I felt comfortable, and I had a group I could ask questions to. They were seasoned podcasters.
Fantastic. Yeah. Meilin Ehlke, I want to thank you so much for being a guest today on a Productive Podcaster. I want to ask you, please tell everyone, if you can, where they can find your podcast, because I want to make sure that people subscribe to you.
Yeah, so everyone come and listen to Moving to Oneness. It's on all major outlets of podcast, Apple, Stitcher, I don't know, Google, iHeartRadio. And the best part, also come to our Facebook group, because there I ask people what they want to hear about. I invite questions, and also I'm going to now invite people to come and speak on it from there. So if you want to join the Facebook group, also called Moving to Oneness. Yeah, and as I said, we started with putting them all on YouTube before. So then only in August, I started putting them on the outlets of podcasts.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Meilin is going to hang around for our next segment, our PodQuest segment. But I want to thank her so much for joining us, and I want you guys to stay right where you are. We'll be right back right after this message.
Thank you.
You've heard the rumblings. You've even thought of starting your own. But how? Everybody knows podcasting is the fastest and best way to get your message out and grow your business all at once. Although everybody knows this, nobody showed you what to do. Well, Podcast Nation is ready to do all the heavy lifting for you while you just deliver your message and grow. Join the nation and start your podcast today. Text podcast to 929-244-4323 and make them hear your voice.
Do you hear what I hear? That's the sound of your tribe, your audience, your people. That's the sound of your nation. The people who love to hear the sound of your voice as you bring your special message to them in your very own podcast. How do you get it to them? Let us handle that. We're Podcast Nation, and we make sure they hear your voice. Podcast Nation is a full-service podcasting firm that does all the hard work for you so you can be the talent and get your message to your people. Just text podcast to 929-244-4323 and talk to one of our staff on how you can get started with your very own done-for-you podcast. Or just go to podcastnation.com and get started today. That's PODCAST nation.com. Your people are waiting on you. Make them hear your voice. Podcast Nation.
Okay, everybody, welcome back to the Productive Podcaster. I told you that my guest was great. Wasn't she great? Well, guess what? She is still here for our next segment, and you know it. I love it. PodQuest.
PodQuest.
Now, for those of you who are wondering, what is PodQuest? I can't even get it out. PodQuest is a segment where we take a question from one of you, the audience members, and we pose it to our guest, and I answer the question as well. Today's question is, and this is a good one, I don't like doing a lot of talking. Is it okay if I have a co-host or several co-hosts? And Meilin, I'll let you take it first.
Yes, have a co-host, because it's fun. The idea is flip. You have to be comfortable with that person, and because it has to be just easy for you to speak with. It doesn't have to be a friend, can be someone you don't know so well, but if you have the same intention, go for it.
And I agree with her. Yes, I definitely agree with her. I have a client who I help produce a podcast for. She has 3 or 4 co-hosts because she wanted to have a group conversation as her podcast. And you can do that. But just like Meilin said, you want to be comfortable with the people. You should be able to talk to each other like that when you're not recording. You should be able to just freely talk to those people and know that you all have a chemistry, that you listen to one another, and that you can talk and listen. Here's the thing. I don't care if you argue on air, but the audience needs to hear one person talk and then the other. So you can't be talking over each other the whole time, because then they won't understand it. But yes, have a co-host. And you're probably wondering, well, why did I say have people argue on there? I'm not telling you to argue, but it's okay if you do, because it's entertaining to the audience. Because the audience is going to pick a side. and it intrigues them. It draws them in. So, there are people that do it all the time. They argue sports. They argue politics. They do it all the time. And people will pay attention because that draws them in. So, yes, the answer to that question is yes, 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 and yes. Okay. So I want to once again thank Meilin Ehlke for joining me on the Productive Podcast. And for those of you who are wondering how you can get on PodQuest and get your question in, all you have to do is join our Facebook group, which is called what? The Productive Podcaster. Go there and just join our Facebook group, The Productive Podcaster, and we can get to your question. But Meilin, thank you once again for joining me today on The Productive Podcaster.
Thank you for having me, Barrett. It was fun speaking to you.
It was fun speaking to you too, and I enjoyed it so much. So now, guys, it is time for our podcast profile. Our podcast profile where I showcase a podcast that I've listened to and I think you might enjoy as well. This one is called Revision Path Docs. Revision Path Docs. And what is that, you say? Well, it's done by Maurice Cherry. Revision Path Docs is really a podcast for African-American graphic designers. Yeah, graphic designers and people in marketing and so forth in that area. It's not my area, but I listened to a couple of the episodes and I liked what I heard. And I think you all may too. And the point to you also is that, guess what? You can have a podcast on anything. So I hope you guys are getting that. You can have a podcast on anything. Revision Path Docs, I encourage you guys to check it out. You can find it on most of your podcast places by Maurice Cherry. Great podcast. Now, it's also time, guys, for our podcast giveaway. That's right, our podcast giveaway. Today's giveaway goes to Mel George. Mel George, guess what you're going to get? You're going to get a door sign that tells everyone to quiet, I am podcasting. So we're going to get that to you, Mel George. Thank you for listening to the Productive Podcast. Now, for those of you who are listening right now saying, well, how can I get in the giveaway? Well, what do you have to do? Join our Facebook group, The Productive Podcaster. Join the Facebook group, and we will put your name in to get one of our giveaways we give away each week on the Productive Podcast. So that's how you can do that. Well, now it's time for my last segment of the show. It's one of my favorite segments. You all know it. You love it. It is Pod Quote time for a productive quote, and I want to give that to you. So today's productivity quote is this: on every level of life, from housework to heights of prayer, in all judgment and efforts to get things done, hurry and impatience are sure marks of the amateur. By Evelyn Underhill. Let me read that one more time to make sure you get that. On every level of life, from housework to heights of prayer, in all judgment and efforts to get things done, hurry and impatience are sure marks of the amateur. So guys, don't be in such a rush to get everything done. Take it as it comes. It will come, but take it as it comes. So guys, that is today's episode of the Productive Podcast. Once again, I want to thank our guest, Ms. Meilin Ehlke. I want to thank her for joining. Make sure you guys subscribe to her podcast, Moving to Oneness. Make sure you subscribe and you follow her. And make sure you guys subscribe to the Productive Podcast and share it with all of your friends. Make sure they know what's going on. Make sure you join our Facebook group and give us a question. Give us a comment. Let us know what you're thinking. We'd love to have you join us. Listen to us on all the podcast platforms and also follow us on YouTube as well. Subscribe there too. We look forward to seeing you next time. And as I always say before I sign off, don't just settle for being awesome. Set your goal to all them all. And take action, everybody. We'll see you next time. Thank you for joining us on the Productive Podcaster. Be sure to join us next time for another great show. We welcome your engagement, so make sure you participate by joining the Productive Podcaster Facebook group and chime in. Also, share the Productive Podcaster with some of your friends right now. If you have a podcast and you're looking for guests, or if you would like to be a guest on a podcast, join our podcast exchange at www.podcastworlddirectory.com. We'll see you next time.